All right, welcome back to unCOMPlex. This is our podcast of the Florida Office of Judges of Compensation Claims. We talk about various issues in the workers' compensation practice. I'm joined today by Adam Kemper, who's going to tell us a little bit more about himself, and then we're going to talk about a post that you put up on LinkedIn about a month ago that sort of drove me to reach out and say this is something I'd like to talk about more. So tell us a little bit about your practice. I think it's unique and maybe of interest to folks.
Well, thank you for having me, and I appreciate having the offline discussion prior to starting today's recording. But my name is Adam Kemper. I'm the owner and founder of the Workplace Law Firm. It's a law firm based here in Boca Raton, Florida. The focus of the practice is really with helping business owners stay in compliance through workplace laws and avoid being sued for things like wrongful termination or wage and hour violations and things like that, and also avoid being audited by the government for similar things like workplace violations. So within that scope of practice, I build a relationship with what tends to be small to mid-sized business owners who seek out my guidance on a pretty regular basis for how to hire, how to fire, how to pay people the right way. And then within that scope, occasionally some of these clients seek my expertise in pointing them in direction of other attorneys who may be of assistance in things like corporate or commercial litigation, or really something outside of my general expertise of labor and employment. So I'll partner with another law firm to help the client with particular legal need that's outside of labor and employment as well.
And to be clear, I asked you before when we were offline to refer to me as Dave, and so we're going to have just a casual conversation, and that's my doing, not any fault of yours. Um, in one of those environments, and I mentioned to you before, back when I was practicing, I had clients that would invite me to their firm Christmas party and call me with kind of off the wall questions, even though I mostly did workers' comp. But you related on LinkedIn that you sort of become known to be associated with some of these businesses. And that happened to me. I would get calls from lawyers. I've got this client that just hired me and they got a comp claim against so and so, and you represent them, but I didn't represent them on that case. We still tried to work together, but this one instance that you had, I think, illustrated some frustration and even devolving to anger. And I think the way you handled it is so positive, and that's really what I want to talk about. Can you tell the listeners about what happened that brought this person to you, and then describe how you, I think, diffused the problem?
Yeah, well, thank you for acknowledging the post. This relates to a client I've been representing for a long time. It's actually a business that is owned by a close childhood friend of mine. So that just goes to show you that as time goes on, and some of us go to law school, we become lawyers, and some of our friends become business owners, and the relationship can continue as we expand through our professional careers. So this is a business that I've been representing for a long time, doing normal labor and employment consulting work like the type that I described earlier, but also taking it a step further and overseeing, let's say, litigation that's handled involving this client for other areas of the law. And in the instance that I mentioned on this LinkedIn post, there was an out-of-state litigation matter. So this wasn't in Florida, this was out of state. Insurance was involved, so the client obtained insurance defense counsel, and I was overseeing that process. And the plaintiff's attorney in that out-of-state case, it was just being, a little bit aggressive. And, I'm used to that type of behavior. It's not my first time dealing with an opposing counsel who is trying to be aggressive. That's not really the issue. It's just in this instance, what sort of crossed the line with this attorney was the excessive level of communications from this attorney, both in email and then calling my personal cell phone after hours. And then some of the content that this attorney was saying, which was suggestive as if I was the reason why my client was sued in this out of state case that I had zero, no involvement in. So it was just kind of an absurd statement. But when I was reflecting on, sort of being attacked in that moment, I was thinking about, what would the younger version of Adam Kemper, how would he have responded to being attacked? So, when someone's saying you're the reason why your client's being sued, getting these excessive calls, this attorney saying some other inappropriate things, how would I have reacted earlier on in my career? Well, like most human beings, we have innate in us this fight or flight mode that happens when we're being challenged, when we're being triggered, when we're being, brought with this contentiousness. And I realized that he was trying, or maybe not intentionally, he was trying to get under my skin and trying to get the reaction that maybe the prior version of me would have given him, which
Mm,
was to engage, engage right back and say something right back to him. But I just decided not to respond in that moment and just, sleep on it, wait until the next day, the next morning. And that's when I think I put the LinkedIn post on and just not even engage with it and just chalk it up as, maybe that attorney was having a rough night. Maybe he didn't like the way things were going with the case. Maybe something was going on with his personal life. We don't know the battles that our colleagues are facing, when they present to us in a case. So I just decided not to engage in that moment and just write about it on LinkedIn, which was actually helpful to write about it, and and not do what I think a prior version of myself would have done, which is say something back. Say, you can't
mm.
say that. That's not true. That you're making this up or something along those lines. So I just decided to abstain essentially in that
But
moment.
think about, you say a prior version of yourself. The thing I think about when you say that is when I was a first, second, third year lawyer, um, I was quite frankly terrified of being viewed as not confrontational, as not being up to the challenge, that somebody was going to say that sort of thing to me, and I would let it go and just, roll off my shoulders. Um, I didn't have the emotional maturity, I think, to let it go. So, what's the advice for young lawyers that are sort of in the position of building a practice and building a reputation? And do I look like a wimp because I don't respond, or is my client going to appreciate that? And how do I deal with that?
Well, I always recommend, when someone is sending you an email or saying something that causes your heart rate to go up, like you're feeling that in the moment, know that that's your, inherent reaction to feeling like you're being attacked, but you're not actually being attacked. Okay. There's not a lion waiting to chase you down and eat you up. You know what I'm saying? This is an attorney saying something that he or she should not be saying, but that does not mean you have to engage at that level. So my number one recommendation is to just take time away from that. I think we live in an age now in 2025, almost 2026, believe it or not, where we feel the need to instantaneously respond to everything, in emails and communications. And some of that is client driven, but some of that is just the need to respond right away, for whatever reason. But if you sleep on it, if you step away, go for a walk, maybe take an hour or two at minimum, just when that heart rate comes back down, are you still thinking you should say the thing that maybe you thought you should say in the moment? Or have you now had enough time to reflect and say, you know what? If this person wants to say something inappropriately to me, I don't need to engage with this person. I can still be who I am, still be professional, still, represent my client's interests. Okay. Because being disrespectful is not like an advancement of your client's case. It never does any good. It never does the good or the thing you think it's going to do. And I'm sure you see this as a judge where the attorneys who are being nasty to one another, if anything, that may hurt their position, in terms of the view from the bench, as well as in front of a potential jury or other decision maker.
Yeah, I
So
think that's true. I think that's true. Um, I talked to a young lady at the workers' comp conference, a young lady attorney, and she told me that when she gets messages that anger her, she gets her iPhone, has a notes program, and she dictates the response into a notes program and just vents out everything in the world, and then she just closes it. She doesn't hit reply to the email message or the text. She opens this other program and she just spews out everything she wants to say. And then she looks at it the next day to decide whether to cut that and paste it into an email message or whether to just delete it. She says 9 times out of 10, she just deletes them. But she feels so much better that she got it off her chest. Um, I think that's positive. Something you said though that really resonated with me was that somebody may be having a bad day. Expound on that if you could. What do you mean?
Yeah, I mean, we're human beings. We're not robots. We're not AI. We're entitled to have bad days. We're entitled to have differing emotions depending on the day. It's nearly impossible to totally separate our personal life from our work life. A lot of it's integrated. So if we're having something rough going on at home, it's hard to just say, snap your finger and say, all right, well, I'm going to be a totally different human being at work and not bring any of that emotion I may have been feeling from home into the workplace. Okay. So because of that, you just never know what someone may be experiencing on a personal level. Okay. And everybody's entitled to just be having a bad day, a bad moment, making mistakes. Here's the thing, like we make a lot of mistakes as, we're all making mistakes. I'm still making mistakes, this stage of my career. I expect to continue to be making them. And I'm sure you just raised your hand and you you
Uh,
you said the same thing
if
essentially.
if you figure out how to quit making mistakes, I'd like you to send me a note. I'd love to know the secret.
Yeah, so I think we deserve to give ourselves first and foremost a little bit of grace and to understand that we have a high degree of pressure in this profession to represent our clients' interests, to give the value that the clients are paying for our service, and then some, hopefully to advance our client's interest before a decision maker who ultimately may not rule in our favor, but all we can do is try our best and
Yeah,
just give grace to know that that's all you can do is do your best each and every day. If you're having a rough moment, that's okay. And then if you can recognize that in yourself, then you can begin to recognize that in your opposing counsel, and let's say even a judge who, believe it or not, they have bad days too, you know,
probably. Yeah.
just like the rest of us, we're all human beings. And then you can also begin to give them a little bit more grace to understand, you know what, if I'm getting yelled at today by this judge, that's not how the judge ordinarily behaves. Maybe he or she is having a bad day too. That happens. And my opposing counsel saying something he or she shouldn't be saying. If it becomes a consistent theme, maybe that's who they are. And that's just how they behave. But if it's a one-off or one day or one moment, just try and as best you can give the other side the benefit of the doubt that they may be having something going on. And then just like I said, give them a little bit of grace.
I think there's a huge power in apology too. I tell new judges when I do training in the course of this job, I've been doing this for 25 years now. Yes, I have lost my temper. I have entered orders that I regret entering. The one that sticks in my mind, I referred to a couple lawyers as children on the playground because of the argument they were having. I never should have gone there, but I did. But if we have those moments personally, I think there's huge power in reaching back out to those people and sincerely apologizing. I raised my voice this morning and that was inappropriate and I apologize. And I think that helps us build bridges. You were talking about these relationships. You know, you've got relationships with people you went to school with that have become business owners, but in a larger sense, you're every day building relationships with other lawyers, right?
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think I had a former mentor of mine at a prior firm tell me that clients they don't necessarily remember all of the ins and outs and details of a particular case. You know where I'm going with this.
yeah,
They're going to remember, how you made them feel in that experience. They want to
yeah,
know that that you have their back, that you have their interests at heart, and a lot of that is through words, and a lot of it is through actions, and a lot of that's through relationship building. So, a lot of that is just something that I try to focus on with my clients, and my goal is to have lifelong clients. I'm not looking to squeeze as much as I can out of a particular matter, a particular situation, and just look at it as like a money-making opportunity. I look at clients as other human beings, as relationships, as people that I want to continue to represent as long as I'm on this planet and as long as they'll have me as their attorney.
and in the opposing counsel arena, at least in workers' comp, we have an extremely small. I know there's a lot of people that practice workers' comp, but in the grand scheme of things, it's a small bar. And the fact is, you're going to practice law against some of these lawyers for the next 20, 30 years. And so bridge building is a lot better than bridge burning from my perspective. Um, so you mentioned a minute ago, maybe this is really just who this person is. They could be having a bad day, or maybe this is really who they are. If it's really who they are, how do you handle that then?
Well, if you know that's how they are, then at least you're more equipped with dealing with maybe some of the antics that go along with who these people are. Because to your point, whether it be in workers' comp or in, employment law, which is where I spend most of my time, dealing with like wrongful termination type claims or wage and hour claims, we tend to see the same people too, over and over. And we get to learn, do some attorneys on the plaintiff side, do they behave in a pretty consistent way to the point where you know what to expect? And if you know what to expect, it doesn't feel the same way when it happens, because I think part of that fight or flight that turns on, that triggering moment, is because it's the unexpected nature of it that comes with it. It's like, whoa, I was not like if a judge, for example, yells at you as an attorney, you may have not expected that in the moment, and many attorneys freeze in that moment because they don't know how to react. They're just like caught off guard. They're like in a state of shock. They don't know what to do. But if, let's say, opposing counsel, judge, really doesn't matter. Another human being could be a friend or a family member. If you know how they're going to act because they've demonstrated over time a pretty consistent way of dealing with you, then it's not going to have the same you're not going to have the same reaction, if that makes sense. And you'll know how
Hopefully.
to deal with it.
Yeah. And I think there's also an element there of let's be fair, there are antagonistic personalities on both sides of issues. Um, how do lawyers effectively prepare their client? Because oftentimes, if you're talking about a deposition or a mediation or some kind of an encounter like that, that antagonistic lawyer is trying to get the injured worker's goat, or they're trying to get the employer's goat. And it's not really going after the lawyer, it's going after the client. How do you prepare a client for that potential tactic and to respond?
Well, you use the key word tactic, because I often say that if lawyers resort to tactics, it's because the facts are not very favorable to them or the law is not particularly favorable to them. So they're using what they have, which is a tactic. And if they're engaging in certain behavior, it's to maybe have you be distracted from the fact that the facts or law is not so supportive because When you have strong facts or you have strong law or both on your side, there's no need to engage in those tactics because the law and the facts, they speak for themselves. We're voices for the facts as being attorneys. We're advocates for the facts as well as the law. But typically, sooner or later, you or a decision maker, you're going to see what the facts actually are, and all the tactics are going to be totally irrelevant because they're not going to play a part in the ultimate decision.
Yeah.
So
You would
that's
hope.
why, yep, sorry, go
You would
ahead.
hope. You would hope they won't. Yeah.
You would hope, and I tend to believe that our system gets it right more often than not. And I look for everything, for everybody who says that the legal system is not fair, it's not, it's too expensive, it's inefficient, it takes too long. All of those are fair points, but I still believe it's the best system that exists, and it still gets it right more times than not. So I'll take my chances and to further address your question about how do we prepare a client? Well, because it is a small universe of attorneys that practice in these niche practice areas, we can tell pretty quickly how a case is going to go depending on who's on the other side. So if I see a familiar face who I know maybe doesn't take the best cases, maybe engages in the tactics I just mentioned before, I can tell the client that's going to be the experience versus someone who is a little bit more reasonable, understands the law, maybe only takes really good cases. That is an interesting tell too, because if you see someone on the other side who only takes really good cases, then you're going to have to put up a fight and you need to properly advise your client on that as well. So yeah, we need, I think we're doing a disservice to our clients if we're not properly advising them on what to expect through the legal process.
I hear that feedback from private mediators a fair bit that they feel like lawyers are showing up at mediations and their clients haven't had any preparation. There's been no discussion of what to expect in terms of process and cadence. And the one that most recently told me about it said that the thing that was apparent was that the corporate representative had no clue how many delays there were going to be. And so every time the mediator came back online with them, she was very exasperated about where have you been for 45 minutes and didn't really have an appreciation for how that was going to work. Um, I love this discussion about wondering where people are um, emotionally and sort of preparednessly, and probably not even a word. Um, but you had some great thoughts also about just the emotional maturity, and so we sort of sidetracked that at the beginning. How did you get from the prior instance of you to the current instance of you? How did you build that? To me, it's a confidence so that you're able to look at your client, say, well, I'm just not going to respond to that, and carry that off with dignity and aplomb in a way that doesn't make your client doubt you. What'd you do to grow into that?
That's a good question. I think early on in our career as attorneys, we try and, take bits and pieces from other mentors or other attorneys that we admire in our profession, and ultimately we take those bits and pieces to be the version of ourself that we ultimately become, which is, our own evolution. And one of the things that I had in mind when you were starting to ask this question was, it's a lot easier to be yourself than someone else. Okay. What I see, unfortunately, a lot of the time is attorneys putting on a persona. It's like they're putting on a mask when they're acting as if they're the attorney that day. And then as soon as they're done with being an attorney, they take the mask off and then they're a different version of themselves. For me, what made the most sense for me is to be exactly who I am in all facets of my life, including my family life, including my life as an attorney. I'll talk to a family member or friend. I probably won't use as much legal terminology, but I'll talk to them the same way as I'll talk to a client of mine. You know, you get the same version of Adam Kemper as everybody else does. And this is just who I've become through just, learning from others, trial and error. You know, of course, and then I feel like I have a little bit of a higher degree of like self-awareness and not to like boast because I don't like doing this, but maybe a high level of EQ, emotional quotient. So because I lean into those things and I'm open to discussing them, that's where I can, see Adam, should I react in this moment? I feel my heart racing. A lot of people don't even notice that type of thing, or the shortness of breath,
Mhm.
or nerves. When I would go in front of a court to argue in front of a judge, you start to notice your hands are a little sweaty. Okay, well that means I'm a little nervous, but nerves are not such a bad thing. That means you care. Like if you can reframe those nerves to caring about the situation, because I've talked to judges before, and if an attorney is too casual and maybe they don't have like that adrenaline going before a hearing, do they really care that much? I don't know. Maybe they do, or maybe they just don't have those emotions going on. But I just became very aware of the different emotions that I was experiencing, and I tried to reframe them in a positive way and try to also notice them when I see them in other people and take them for what they're worth, and like I said, give them grace if it's not an idealistic response or reaction by the other person.
So getting from the old Adam Kemper to the new Adam Kemper was a conscious decision. So you're focused on that and on your reactions, and you're building to better reactions tomorrow or better reactions even next week in a sort of an ongoing evolutionary process of understanding yourself. Is that fair?
Yeah, yeah, I think we all go through some degree of that evolution. I mean, it's the aging process, and hopefully we learn from our prior mistakes and we become a little bit more aware of them and try to become better. So I don't think I'm like any different than anybody else. It's just something I'm open to talking about. And a lot of people think that talking about this type of subject matter is, I don't know, a little strange, or maybe it's a sign of weakness because, guys shouldn't be talking about emotions. But I actually think the opposite. I think it's a sign of strength to be willing to open up and have these delicate discussions. I'll just put it that way.
And I don't know about the gender issue. That may be a very valid point, but I perceive that as certainly a maturity issue. Um, I think younger lawyers are struggling with this sort of thing more than people who have sort of grown into their own a little bit. Um, and that's who I hope listens to these podcasts, because I hope that they come away understanding that everybody makes mistakes. I make a dozen every day, and so they're no worse off than I am. Those mistakes can usually be fixed. But I think the really powerful message you're delivering today is that when you do that, if you focus on how you're going to do better and how you're going to give yourself some grace and not, beat yourself up, then I think it's all about growth and it's about maturing, and you're going to turn into the 2025 Adam, and that's what we all should be sort of goal oriented towards, I think.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, early on in the career, you have so much going on, a lot of different challenges. You're just learning how to become an attorney. You're dealing with the demands of your employer. You're dealing with the demands of your clients. You are dealing with the demands of judges and ultimate decision makers, while at the same time still growing up and like learning how to be an adult too, by the way,
Yeah.
and dealing with just people in general, because you haven't had really when you're fresh out of law school, you really haven't had that much life experience. Most people, that is. Some people go to law school later on in their life, but if you're coming straight out of college, going to law school, you're going to be in your early 20s, and you don't have a lot of life experience to to deal with some of those, you know, people to people challenges, the behavioral challenges. So that's why I think young lawyers probably struggle the most because they're trying to balance all of that, figure out who they are as an attorney, figure out the profession itself, and also how to, interact with other people. And they
Yeah.
don't teach that in law school, for as much as us attorneys always talk about, well, they need to have a practice of law or a business of law or type of course in law school. Well, I actually think law students would benefit more from like a mental health course, which focuses on the mental health issues to just be mindful of as you enter into this profession, including dealing with the demands of your employer, dealing with the demands of your clients, dealing with the demands of the judiciary, and balancing all of that. And like we've both said, giving yourself some grace to just know, like, take it one step at a time, one day at a time, and know that like if you had one bad day, it's okay. You get a restart tomorrow, you know?
Yeah, and if we taught that kind of a class in law school, maybe we could get off of the top 10 list for things like substance abuse and uh, emotional issues and challenges and divorce and all of these sort of bad outcomes that stress sort of results in. Um, and I don't think we're very introspective about it. I think that's an outstanding sort of viewpoint and perspective. Um, who would you tell a young lawyer to look to? So you think of somebody that's in a firm and maybe they have a mentor. They're the lucky ones, I think. But maybe somebody that's 3, 5 years out of law school and they've hung a shingle and they're trying to. You mentioned no business background. They're trying to balance a checkbook and they're trying to run a trust account and all this stuff. How do you find a mentor in the community that you can talk to about this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, well, success leaves clues. So you can see who in your community has been successful in the area of law that maybe you're interested in. And success is a number of things. It's not monetary. I know most people, they immediately go to monetary success, but for me, success is like balancing and in trying to include family time and exercise and eating properly while at the same time doing a great job for my clients. So that is what my definition of success is. So if you're a law student or a junior attorney, what type of success resonates with you personally? And can you then find someone in your community which has exhibited that type of success? And then reach out to them because more often than not, here's the thing, everybody's so afraid to reach out to people. I don't know why. But more often than not, if you reach out to somebody and just say, I'd love to take you out for lunch or coffee or just have a Zoom meeting where I can just pick your brain. Um, Most people will say yes to that. I know I would. I've done that many times for
Yeah,
people. And it's just everybody's so afraid of hearing no or that they might be bothering somebody. And yes, we are all busy. But I think somewhere deep down inside, a lot of us, we do want to help people too. We want to mentor junior attorneys or law students because we want to tell them, like, there's not just one path to success here. There's multiple different ways. You don't have to go maybe the traditional way you think you need to go. There are other ways you can go and you can still have a successful career. It's just you have to decide early on, what does success mean for you? Because it means something differently for different people.
sure. I love your idea of reaching out to somebody. I try to I don't discourage people from going to law school. I don't teach law school. I teach undergrad. And I try to encourage them that if they're gonna go spend $200,000 on a law degree, that they should pick up the phone and call somebody that practices law and their dream first. If you think you want to be a state attorney, call one of them. And it might take you a few tries, but they probably let you go spend a day with them and see what state attorneys really do. And wouldn't you rather figure that out on the front end than after you spend the 200 grand and find out that this isn't what you like to do? Um, So I reiterate and endorse that. I think pick up the phone and call somebody and talk to them. And I don't take a lot of phone calls, but I don't fail to call people back. And I think there's a lot of people in the community that feel that way. Um, we're running a little long on time. I try to keep these reasonably short, but I'm enthralled with your story on LinkedIn. I'm enthralled with this sort of theme of grace, of emotional quotient, and all of these things. And I want you to have the last word, the parting shot. What would you close this podcast with in terms of summarizing or best advice or anything like that?
So you have really one life as far as we know to live, and you know, no one is going to come to you to save you, to tell you to work out more, to tell you to eat right, especially your employer. Um, and no one's going to say, get inside your body and know how you're feeling either. So just remember that you have this one body and that you need to take care of it. And because you take care of your body, you're going to have longevity, whether it's in this profession or something else. And hey, there's no shame in saying this profession is just not for me,
Yeah.
or working for a law firm is not for me, or doing this particular thing is not for me. Just know that you always have choices and you always have to look out for yourself because really nobody else will. So just don't lose sight of that as you if you're listening to this podcast and you're thinking about practicing law, or you're maybe in your early stages of practicing law and you're just miserable or you just don't feel right. Know that you can do something about it and you can change that just by switching gears and maybe doing something else.
I was inspired by the post on LinkedIn. I'm more inspired after our conversation. I think this is a fantastic message you're delivering, and I applaud you for making that effort. I'm grateful for you for being here. So thank you for your time and your investment in our listeners, and hopefully they'll resonate with these thoughts will resonate with them. So
Thanks so much for teeing up this conversation. I really do appreciate it.
yeah, not at all. I'm not very good at this. I'm trying to turn off the recording.